Well, thanks for everyone that's joining us and those that are still going to sign in. We've got a nice but perfectly formed little meeting here, little group for today's virtually speaking webinar on lockdown, easing and mental well-being. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Dan, Kate, Mandy, and Onyinye, and we'll be talking about a variety of things, but let's do introductions first. I'll talk about me and then each person will share a bit more about what they're doing and where they're from. So I'm Chi-Chi. I started a company called Ascenti 5 years ago, 5 years in February coming. And the idea was to make it easy for people to post questions to speakers at an event. I knew nothing about the sector. I just had an inkling that I could solve this problem as a software engineer at a conference where I'd been asked to text my questions into a speaker before the event started. So I'm aware someone's just joined us. Hi, Julia. And we're literally starting a bit early, so I'm going to start. Apologies, I'll do my introductions again. Lovely of you to join us, Julia. So I'm just starting with the introductions, and you probably know this anyway. So I was at a conference and they said, look, at the end of 3 days, we want you to send in your questions to our speakers panel. And we're going to do this by asking you to text some numbers and details to this mobile phone number. And we did, people sent in questions, but it was really, really archaic because number one, you couldn't get any context around which questions would be posted onto the projector during the actual event. So some questions were more relevant than others, but we had to sit through hearing them, because they were being texted in and someone was typing them into a computer, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I can solve a problem around this before the next conference. And that's what started off Ascenti, and now it's got a life of its own. We found that the polling feature that some of you might have experienced in the run up to this event has actually captured people's imaginations more than the question board element of what I set out to design. So that's me. I'm going to ask Kate Wood to introduce herself, and guys, feel free, tell us what you do and go for it.
No, thanks, Chi-Chi. I love being part of your event. Yeah, so my name's Kate Wood, and for one more week, I am now MD and founder of a software company. During lockdown, it was the first time in my whole life, I'm nearly 45, I've ever had a time to pause because I've been a single parent, I've worked for years, I feel like I've been on the go forever. I've paused, I've resigned from my job, I've walked an hour and a half every day. Since the start of the year, I've lost 5 stone. I've cycled about 50 miles a week. I've started going outdoor swimming in Salford Keys, which is bloody freezing. I've started charity packing meals for vulnerable people for Open Kitchen Manchester and got involved with Keep Britain Tidy. COVID has been awful, but it has given me a chance to bloody breathe, give myself some grace and do something different. So I'm still a consultant and for a culture and employee engagement, which will be what I'll be talking about today, to see if you can support your employees to make some of these positive changes.
Fantastic. You're cheering in the Salford Keys. That is nuts.
Yeah.
Is it even hygienic?
I bloody love it. It's probably cleaner in Salford Keys than it is in the rest of Salford.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, we don't have any boats or anything on it. It's actually quite a placid body of water. So that's amazing. Yeah. Well done. That's amazing. Over to you, Mandy. Lovely to see you again, because Mandy and Kate spoke at this for the very first time when we did the very first event on the 30th of March. So it's a bit of a review, hearing their thoughts about, 3 or 4 months of lockdown.
I know. And in some ways that feels a lifetime ago, and in some ways it's kind of gone like that, right? In my head there's time it's still March outside because I feel like I've missed out on a few months. But yeah, so I'm Mandy Sinclair. I'm a coach and mentor, and I've been doing that for about 2 years now after I took my own big pause 2 years ago. 30 years in large financial services and a lot of senior roles in finance, operations and change. I decided it was time to do what my heart wanted for the first time rather than what my bank balance needed. So I follow my heart. I coach full-time and mentor young people that work in IT. I specialise in particularly working with women who maybe haven't got great confidence or self-esteem, haven't put themselves first, don't really have their own life plan because they've spent their lives looking after everyone else. And I help them work out who they really are, what they really want, and give them the confidence to go get it. So I have a great job. Through lockdown, I've had the joy or the pain of being in an empty house. There's times when that's not been good, and there's times when I've spoken to people that are working from home with 3 kids homeschooling and are ready to lose it, and they're very jealous of me. And walking has definitely kept me sane. An early morning walk like yourself, Kate, every day I'm out there, and that has definitely helped me. And I noticed spring like I've never noticed spring before, so it was great to see.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that briefly, actually, about sort of
still doing it.
You're a morning person or an evening person, some of the things you need to decide early into lockdowns. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Lovely. Thank you for that, Mandy.
No
And thank you for that, Kate, as well. We're on to Dan now. This is Dan Willis. Go for it.
I've definitely got imposter syndrome, knowing who I'm actually on this panel with today. So, it's amazing stories. So I'm Dan Willis. I'm one of the co-founders of Wellgood. We're a preventative and personalised digital mental health platform. We empower and educate organisations and employees to look after and improve their mental health. That's the selling part, but in actual fact, what I do is I'm a mental health ambassador for Mind. I've been working within mental health and culture for probably the past sort of 10 years now, and actually followed my own mental health journey since I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So it's all been driven, and actually looking at what Kate and Mandy, when you're talking about breathing, that's actually what drove me to actually start Wellgood, and actually drove me to try and change and help as many lives as possible. So yeah, that's really me in a nutshell.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about how Wellgood works. I'm going to sort of keep my lips, I'm literally going to sort of hold myself and stop myself asking you questions about the tech side of it, just a holistic view of how it works, because it's fascinating that it exists as a platform, especially now in this day and age. So thanks for that, Dan. Over to you, Onyinye. Keen to hear from you.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Onyinye. Thank you so much, Chi and everyone at your team for having me here today. Where do I begin? I have so many roles. So I guess I'll start off with the one that's first and foremost in my head. I'm a postgraduate student at King's College London, where I'm finishing my degree in education policy and sociology. Woo, just the dissertation left. And it's been interesting studying in lockdown with no access to university or a library, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm also the founder and director of Enrich Learning, which is an online education platform and tuition center that I started when I was 12. So I've been doing it for 10 years, and I say with pride to my parents, well, I've been working for 10 years, guys, so I know the struggle as well. And I also just took on a new role. I know you'll probably think I'm crazy, as the deputy CEO of an education trust. It's called the Challenger Trust, and our goal is to build the character of young people across the country using extracurricular activities. Today, I'm going to be talking about a number of things, juggling everything, that transition out of COVID and learning how to learn in a new way, and how to learn digitally and virtually and still keep sane. But also, like a number of other people have said, learn how to just use this moment to pause and to really get to know yourself and to look after yourself and be the best version of you. So I'm really looking forward to today. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to that, and particularly on the side of COVID and its practical implications. I'll let you share more on that when we get to your section. So it's been great. We've done the introductions. Let's move on to the actual discussion. So we're on to Dan now. We're talking about getting the balance right. So to further lift lockdown restrictions, the government is encouraging people to involve employees in decisions about working from home. We've seen a little bit of that in the news this week. Have you observed any trends with regards to employee productivity while working from home? And do you have any examples of crises, employee crises during this period? Because I'm aware that what Wellgood is trying to do in some ways is to prevent some of that. And what are your predictions about this whole new change come, the 1st of August? Are people going to flock onto the tube in London or public transport elsewhere, or people just going to carry on working from home?
So yeah, thanks for having me again, Chi. So let's just start that no industry or sector has been unaffected by the outbreak of COVID. many people have had to make significant changes to their daily lives at relatively short notice. Like when we talk about digital transformation, we usually talk about years, or sometimes when you talk about government as well, decades, because we know how quick they usually move. But in an instant, everyone had to work from home, realistically. So the way that we had to work changed, and whether that's hours, location, or being able to do your job at all, that all changed. So many business leaders assumed that the current remote working conditions are temporary, while countries manage the threat of coronavirus, and that will eventually get back to standard working practice. However, the truth is that the workplace will never be the same post-pandemic. And what we're calling the world's biggest trial of remote working, companies are rethinking the number of common workplace misconceptions. So like, employees are less productive when working from home and only deliver their best work during 9 till 5. Well, we know that by living through this, that this isn't true. Since lockdown, Deloitte actually surveyed over 1,000 UK employees and found that 55% of workers believe that their colleagues are just as, if not more, productive than before lockdown. Unfortunately, though, in the same survey, Deloitte also reported that 38% of workers say lockdown has had a negative impact on their well-being. Now, this could be for a number of reasons, one being the furlough scheme, or as I've often called it, the forgotten. Now, where although employers are still having a responsibility to support their health and support those staff, the rules surrounding the scheme has meant that communication with that said employee has fallen into grey areas, and that often has been overlooked. I've experienced this myself, and with some of the businesses that we work with, where employees have actually been completely forgotten about. They don't have their weekly check-ins with managers. They don't have, anything of that regard, because those businesses feel that if they were to communicate, they'd be breaking furlough rules. So this whole grey area that the government actually outlaid has become quite an issue. And for those staff, they feel redundant. It's as simple as that. They've gone through a grieving process. And also, staff who are not on furlough may feel a form of resentment, thinking that they're on holiday. So there is this often this big battle of crises between. But one thing, and we've touched on it actually before we started talking, and it's about boundaries. And I call it eat, sleep, work, repeat, rather than rave, repeat, as anyone who's old enough to remember that. And unfortunately, with little or no commuter time, boundaries between our personal lives and our professional lives have been completely blurred. How many people have witnessed Zooms where they're interrupted by children? My 5-year-old probably will burst in at some point, or being, or speaking to someone whilst they're sat in their bed. This is negative behavior, being sat in your bed whilst on a Zoom call. We were quite fortunate that we had a spare room just as lockdown hit. So myself and my wife decided to convert it into an office very quickly. So this lack of split between identities can see a really big effect on negative behavior. And chuck in homeschooling into the mix, then we know that's going to be an issue. There we go, right on cue. Yeah, okay. See you later, Henry. Look, I'm on the phone. Thank you. Anyway, you think I planned that, wouldn't you?
we had one of these webinars on homeschooling, and a little boy came in, and his dad had just said, last time we did one of these, he came onto the call and said, Daddy, I need a poo. That's why I invited him to do that one. But then he came and said he needed a wee, so it was easier. His dad didn't have to stop. So carry on, we're used to it.
So talking about experience, and how lives have changed, and anyone who's watching this, their lives have probably completely changed. And I talk about my own lived experience. So I live in Bournemouth. It's been on the news quite regularly recently, with the whole world coming down here. We've got no internet basically, so I have to hotspot on my phone constantly, which is horrible. But I commute, or did commute, to London every single day. So that's 6 hours of journey every single day to Liverpool Street. So Monday to Friday. I've got 2 children, of whom I did not see Monday to Friday, but I had to sleep here. For my own mental health, I had to sleep at home so that I knew my family was safe. It's as simple as that. Now that's completely changed. My whole viewpoint on life is that I don't need to be in London every day. My whole viewpoint on life is that I can now work comfortably in my own home, but why not go up to London for, you know, actual meetings as opposed to needing to do admin on a daily basis? So my whole life has changed in that sort of perspective, and I believe, and through the people that I speak to, it's exactly the same. So then looking about how, you know, predictions, you know, about how this can actually develop, you know, there will be a more flexible way of working. It's as simple as that. We won't all go back into the office. We won't all be remote. There needs to be a compromise between each, because, you know, as employees, you know, we've all come to terms with one way of working. We may not agree with it fully, so we have to have that compromise. So commuting will change forever. We might miss that social interaction of the office, but we definitely don't miss the commuting. So that is something that will change, and we will learn to be more social in different ways. So on top of that, hopefully bad email etiquette won't be tolerated anymore. You know, when it's 10 o'clock at night and you feel you still need to email that client, that will not be tolerated. The fact is that we are now setting precedent now for how we work in future. We can set those boundaries. We can say, actually, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I need to feed my kids. You know, I need to make sure that my home is in good order. So this is what we will be able to see moving forward. I really feel that respect and bad email etiquette will not be tolerated in that way. I see that people will start picking up the phone more rather than constantly using Zoom or Hangouts or whatever your flavor of tea is. Like it's something that we've put up with during this process. I feel that it's been that connection that we've had with individuals. However, as lockdown does ease, as we are now introducing ourselves back into offices, that reliance on Zoom will be less and less and less. So we can still have a physical meeting with someone, or whilst we're working from home, there's no reason why we can't pick up the phone to avoid terrible bandwidth that we experience in Bournemouth especially. And one of the big things that I've started seeing, especially with a lot of our clients, is that we're now seeing that businesses don't actually need permanent workspace. One of our partners that we work with in particular, what they've actually gone and done is they've kept all their staff, which is amazing in that way, but they've only planned their office for half of their staff to be in at one time. So they've actually moved into a co-working area. They're moving into a co-working area where it's more temporary. It means that they can share that space with others, but it means that they haven't got that huge overhead of having a central London office for, you know, a large workforce. So we are seeing that rather than being in really cramped living spaces or working spaces, that, you know, space is going to be more readily available and people won't be permanently fixed, that there will be, you know, that around us. But yeah, that's really what I've started seeing. Hopefully that covers most of what you thought, Chi-Chi.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. I mean, the thought of people, you know, picking up the phone rather than doing Zoom, I think I'm starting to see that. So, you know, you start interacting with people and they're like, okay, yeah, we need to speak, but let's just do it over the phone. You know, I don't feel like being on Zoom today. And so I agree on that point. I do wonder, have you had any experiences, maybe anecdotally, what you've heard people dealing with in the lockdown around crisis management at work, workplace issues? Through, I mean, you touch on it with the fascinating sort of insight around sort of forgotten people during the furlough period and the furlough scheme. But has anything else come come to the fore in your line of work around that?
So we've seen a huge spike in anxiety, especially stress at the beginning of lockdown. Through my sort of ambassador sort of work with Mind, what we're looking at is more of it's more similar to PTSD that we're going to be going through, as opposed to sort of just general anxiety or general stress. And that's because of the prolonged nature that we've had to go through. This has been traumatic. There's no other way to explain what we've been through, and it's changing the world forever. And so because of that, there is going to be this relay of PTSD, and people have been going through that grief cycle. People have been going through understanding of loss or lack of purpose, all these different aspects that have meant that they've needed to go and seek help. But because they've not felt that they've been able to go and seek that help because of lockdown, there's also been a rise in things like domestic abuse. There's been a rise in negative behaviors. There's some really stark numbers around suicide that will be released very shortly, and we've been speaking to local police about the rise in suicide during lockdown, and this is because of that forgotten feeling. This is because of such huge change among this sort of work culture that we've always believed that 9 to 5 is just that way of being, but if you've got kids, there's no such thing as 9 to 5 nowadays. Me and my wife, we've got split shifts. It's like I'm working hospitality again. It's like, but this is how we need to do. We still need to be more output led now rather than input. I think we've gradually come to that understanding, but definitely to begin with, anxiety spiked massively, especially with those who aren't as invested in technology as say for example us on this call right now.
Yeah, amazing stuff. That's really, really interesting. I really do think some of the things you're touching on that makes me think there will be a role for sort of coaches, people that provide some sort of counselling for new companies or even existing companies when new members of staff come along. There should Definitely. Be sort of a poll or a survey that says, tell us actually, how did you feel coming towards the end of your old role as it might have happened during, the coronavirus lockdown? We need to start talking about it more regularly. Otherwise, we'll literally pretend we can forget the forgotten and expect them to work.
Definitely.
That's amazing.
One thing that we've introduced, and it's a manual process, so it's not fully part of the Well Good program if we talk about through AI and automation. But one thing which we've really relied on is the Mind Workplace Action Plan, so WAPs. And they are incredible. So if you've got a really great relationship with your staff, it's a great way to speak and be open with your staff and understand their triggers, understand any ways that they can signpost towards the fact that they may be declining, and that way you can be aware of it as a manager and you can take responsibility over that, because as an employer you're not responsible for someone's mental health. It's as simple as that, but you're responsible for helping them through any challenges that they're facing. So if you give your employees as much ammunition, as much willing to be able to give you that information, then you're going to have a better workforce. It's simple as that, because if you can take action off the back of that, then you're going to have a much happier, healthier culture.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. I do feel that I'm going to watch this video when it's live, and I'm going to send loads of people to it, because there's just a lot of helpful stuff, and you can already feel it's going to be evergreen. It'll be valid in November and January 2021, because it's like, it happens to be because we've done it so soon into the easing beginning. Really, really helpful stuff. So thank you for that, Dan. On to Kate. You're talking about getting back to the office, Kate. So you've not got too much to follow up on, but because Dan's already started talking about it already in a sense. do you have any good practice tips for creating a workplace culture that improves mental health and well-being? And how should savvy employers look after employees that are not able to return to the office but have proven productive at home? So, and how do employees prepare? So take it away.
Well, I'll just talk briefly about it. Yeah, so thanks, Dan, because obviously I'm going to follow on from a lot of the things that you've said. I've done a lot of panels during this time, and a lot of questions have said to me, a lot of questions I've had is, how can my culture survive? You know, leaders of organisations, how's my culture going to survive? You know, when we've not seen each other for 4 months, 5 months. And my answer is always the same. If you didn't have a great culture in the first place, your culture isn't going to survive, regardless of COVID or not, because you didn't put the time in and the effort in the first place. If you had a good culture before COVID, your culture won't be the same as it was in March, but you will still have a strong culture. So it's those 2 types of organisations. And the one I'm going to focus on is the one that had a culture and just needs to now build on it and adapt it. So the 3 areas that I've been talking to organisations that I work with for this next step, okay, and there's physical, which is like, you know, what's going to happen either when you're in your office or when you're at home. So that's signage, you know, if you're in the office, that's the signage, instruction, communication around social distancing, ensuring that social distancing, you know, ensuring it's safe, cleanliness, all of that. You'll need to advise people on that at home, but mainly that's for if they're going back into the office. And as we know, not everybody will. Like Dan said, it is not a good time to be in commercial property. We've got the practical, which is if people are going to go back into the office, how are they going to get back in there? If they're not, like Dan said, it's no longer good enough to be just making do 6 people around the dining room table. We need to provide people with the practical steps to have a healthy work environment, whatever that looks like for them. And then we've got the emotional, which I'm going to talk about at length. What underpins everything to do with practical, physical or emotional well-being during getting back from over these next few months is communication. And I'm really boring because all I talk about is communication. But at this time, like Dan says, when everybody's feeling a lot more anxious, you know, I sort of made light of the things that I feel I've achieved during lockdown, but I've not talked about the days when, you know, I just felt completely miserable and when, you know, I felt like at the end of my tether and when I was upset and all of that, because there was no clarity on what was going to happen. And people need clarity in their life, and clarity needs to start in business with communication. So that starts right from, like you said, we're all okay doing virtual meetings. If I was on a big team and I'm the lowest paid or most junior member of that team, am I going to use my voice on a virtual meeting? Probably not, because you're going to get over-talked and that's really difficult. People are going to miss those virtual cues. You know, it's not the same, is it? If you're new to an organisation, like we've said, you really need to look at how you're going to communicate with those new starters. I've been helping businesses set up plans for remote onboarding. So it goes to start with that meeting. And then for me, I'm really, really big on people giving clarity to that communication plan for what's going to happen on a daily basis. So that might be your daily huddle with your team. What's gone well? What's not? What's your win of yesterday? You know, how are you doing? What are you going to focus on? What are your challenges? Your weekly successes, so having your weekly huddles, your monthly, stand up with the whole company, whether your company's got 7 people or 700 or 7,000, talk to the company so that everybody's on the same page and understands the vision and values of what that company's trying to achieve that month. And I'm really big on publishing. You can't over communicate on publishing, and I've done a document if anyone wants it on if you are having cultural events during the year. Now they'll be online. Don't just think, oh, we'll tell people the week before. It doesn't matter because they don't need to get there. People still need to know. It still needs to be in people's diaries. You know, as anyone who's heard me talk before, I'm big on getting cultural ambassadors in your business. So these are people that you vote in that are going to protect your culture, your parent champions that are going to support those people. Imagine the hell of coming back to maternity now, when not only are you not even getting out of the house away from your kid, which would have been the bonus of getting back from maternity before, you're now just working in another room when your kid's probably in that room, you know, and it's like all of everything that was hard in business before and everything that businesses did badly with communication before, this has now given us a chance to reboot and properly look at how we communicate and do it properly. So for me, it's about rigor, It's about reliability, it's about regularity, it's about, if you say you're going to have a meeting at 9 o'clock every morning, have that in people's diaries so that they know what to expect. Because the biggest thing that will cause unrest during COVID is the uncertainty and lack of clarity from businesses. You know, you touched on, and I think I touched on it last time I was on your webinar, was around domestic violence, was around those people who are having an extra difficult time. As director of culture, of which I was for a big 550 people IT business, I ran an extra love list, and that was all about having those people who are vulnerable in your organisation for whatever reason. Maybe they just split up with a partner last week, you know, but that for them is a vulnerability. Maybe they're having financial difficulties, and have a list and have people who check in on them regularly, you know, whether that's via software, but, you know, face to face or via email. And let's keep a check on these vulnerable people in our organisation so they don't become a statistic like the ones that Dan spoke about. And there's so many small but yet thoughtful ways that businesses could do that don't need to cost a lot. You know, sending out small things in the post or e-cards via email. I was on a call today, some calls for Microsoft Inspire today, and a really good idea was someone said, you know, they're not all going to be able to get their on a night out. So the team leader had sent out a pack of spices and like a recipe card with some different types of ingredients to each of the members of the team, and they'd all cooked it, and it was a different kind of foreign food, and they felt like they'd been on a night out. Plus, it's proper pushed them out of the comfort zone, because you just feel uncomfortable cooking food that you don't know about, don't you? That's not your normal, whatever you might have. You know, there's, and I know that we need to think a lot about inclusion, and I'll just very quickly talk about that, because I sit on the panel for Women in Technology for the UK, global, and the Women in IT, Women in the IT channel. Now, inclusion and diversity in the workforce was never easy. So now it's going to be even harder, isn't it, to get diversity into your workforce, and then once you've got a diverse workforce, to make them feel included and like they belong. And that's what we want for everybody. And I think that's where people have got to start looking at their recruitment policies and adapting them anyway, but adapting them now for COVID. And how are perhaps the voices that were most marginalised before in an organisation, how are organisations going to make sure that they're not even more marginalised now they're working from home? You know, you hear a lot of women saying, well, I don't think I'll get a seat at the table. Well, if you're not even getting into the building where the door is, where the table is, where the seat is, you know, it's that kind of thing. I think, you know, what we've seen and with the Black Lives Matter campaign and during COVID as well has highlighted more than ever that organisations are not doing what they need to do for diversity. And that again goes back to communication. So every step of what you need to have as a healthy, diverse, inclusive, you know, well-being organisation, for me, starts with every single bit of it starts with communication. And that would be my very quick, rambly thing. What we need to do.
And you've done that in a way that's made up for some time as well. It's fascinating that I've been making notes about what you've been sharing, and you're absolutely right. There is a lot of changing behavior that we're kind of expecting people to embed. So with the organizations you work with, how do you check that some of those daily, you know, catch-ups, as it were, those weekly and monthly times of giving clarity, do you have to make yourself accountable to them? Do they have to be accountable to you? How does that work?
I think what needs to happen, and it's a great point, Chi, because everything starts with leadership. So every single issue, I think, that's not being done well in a business can be, you know, tracked back to the leadership team. But it's about education. So if we worked in an organisation and I worked for you in an organisation, and you just said to me, right, what I need you to do now is stop what you've been doing the way you've been doing it. You need to book in all these meetings with all your people, monthly one-to-ones, performance management, all of that. I'd just think, oh, buzz off, Chi, I've got enough to do. Do you not see how busy I am? But if you took your time and explained to me about why we were doing it, and I know it sounds so basic and so patronising, but a lot of people in a leadership position have been thrown into a leadership position because maybe they were great at working in the customer service team, they excelled, or they were the best salesperson. So they go then become a leader, but maybe they've not got the skills or the resilience or the experience of why. So a lot of people in organizations, they don't understand the vision and values of the business. It's either a strap line on a wall or something on the bottom of an email. So they don't understand why they're being asked to do what they're being asked to do. And yet, if it was explained to them and some time was given to them, and they had a leadership academy which explained when they started the organization that if you communicate in this way with your people, this is what you will get back from your people, and you will see your retention go up. Your retention go up. Your attrition go down. Your engagement scores go up. But it's got to be about educating those leaders. And likewise with diversity, people don't understand and people don't want to ask the question. And, people feel awkward, don't they? If you're a man managing an IT team, you're going to want another man maybe that looks exactly like you to just come in because you're going to talk about the same things. And that's easier than maybe bringing in a woman from a different background with a different set of circumstances into your team. And that kind of homophily, which stops diversity in businesses, is something that it just goes back to education and giving people support.
Yeah, I hear you, and I see that there's time now to start giving people little pointers as to how they make those changes. And maybe in the Q&A I might have an articulated question that's in my head around this, but keeping under your hat something around any practical experiences you've had with your clients since the start of lockdown around giving people actionable steps to take.
Yeah.
So we shared these already, but if there are any case studies, any examples, if we've got time on Q&A, it'd be lovely to hear them. So thanks so much for that, Kate. That was fascinating. It was brilliant. Over to you, Mandy. And we're talking about getting into a new swing. I'm conscious we're running out of time, but we've got to hear you properly. So lockdown has seen a lot of people take positive steps to develop healthier habits. Those had its downsides. Have you got any tips, Mandy, from your coaching experiences that work to help people juggle the inevitable uncertainty and stress from transitioning out of this season to the next as lockdown restrictions ease? So my big question is, how do we prepare for Christmas?
Yeah, well, Christmas feels like a long dream, doesn't it, at the moment, or a long way off at the moment. But yeah, no, I'm really interested to talk about this topic because it's something that I'm working with a number of clients on at the moment. And it's interesting because when lockdown happens, and it happens really suddenly, and as a number of people have talked about, and I did on the first call we were on, you kind of go into the grief cycle and you deal with kind of the anger, shock, the denial of what's happened because you've lost your way of life. But what I've found is actually it's the last 4 to 5 weeks that have caused the most anxiety with people that I'm dealing with, and that anxiety is actually growing week on week at the moment, and times are becoming more challenging because the rules aren't as clear now. There's much more ambiguity out there. There's much more uncertainty out there. There's this kind of feeling that, well, is this it? Is this what I've got to get used to for the rest of my life? Because is this ever really going to change? Is this the new normal? That awful phrase that I'm very tired of hearing. And also different people, it's becoming really clear now. You see, when we were in lockdown, the rules were very clear and everybody pretty much had to follow them. Now people are able to have their own interpretation of many rules. So some people are very happy to go out, go to pubs, go to restaurants. Some people are still very, very fearful of doing anything. And there's pressure now, there's much more judgment, there's people passing judgment on other people on social media. And so I'm seeing anxiety actually go up and up and up. So one thing I've been trying to work with people is how to deal with that uncertainty of the future, because, we've learned through this that there isn't as much certainty as many of us thought there were in our lives, whether it comes to booking a holiday or planning Christmas or knowing that the kids are going to go back to school in September. All of that suddenly seems a bit uncertain that we would never have contemplated before. And I think it's really important. There's been a few references to this. We've all been in the same storm, but we've definitely not been all in the same boat. And some people have had a chance to take a real step back, develop healthier habits. Some people have been in maybe abusive houses where they've not been able to escape. They've been dealing with 3 children, homeschooling, single parent, and having to do a full-time job, and frankly are at the end of their tether. So it's very, very important that we allow people to accept where they are. I'm seeing a lot of lockdown guilt, where, you know, they haven't learnt new hobbies, they haven't climbed mountains, they haven't done these things because they've just been surviving. So, you know, there's a lot of people in different places coming out of this. So as we kind of move forward, the key things I work with people on is, the first thing is to try and get a moment or two of reflection and to really look at what you've learned about yourself and your life over this period. So what do you want to keep from what you've been doing through lockdown? What have you learned that you no longer need in your life? I went on a very interesting seminar with my coaching school where someone said she's working out what wants to die within her. So like, what is the things that she's been a slave to for most of her life that she no longer wants to be a slave to? You know, what can we let go and not need? And also, you know, what do you need to forgive yourself for lockdown? You know, there's people coming out of lockdown having put on weight, not lost weight, having not done the things they need to do, having not homeschooled their kids the way that they think everyone's perfectly homeschooling their kids. Well, I haven't actually talked to anyone who's perfectly homeschooled kids, you know, and most people have given up at one stage or another. So it's about being really compassionate to yourself and saying, what is really important to me going forward? So you might realize how much you really need connection, or you might realize how much you really need to care about safety. You know, people are in different places in concern about the virus than other people, you know, depending on your health, how many vulnerable people you've got around you. So it's about taking a moment to understand what's really important to you so that you have your own decision framework that you can make. It will not be the same as anybody else's. So don't look for everyone else's agreement with what you're trying to do, because you won't get it. Don't look for consensus on social media, because you won't get it. But take that moment to work out what's really important to you and then honor that for yourself. The second area that I tend to work with people on is stay as focused as you can on the facts, because the two most dangerous words I'm seeing at the moment are what if. You know, it is so easy at the moment to just spiral yourself into kind of a pit of despair, because you can say what if 1,000 times and come up with a different answer every time. You know, so it's about anchor on what are the facts that you're happy to get. You know, find a couple of sources, you know, government websites, whatever it is, to get the facts. So if you need to understand travel restrictions, if you need to understand the current plans for school, you know, or the current social distancing rules, get the basic rules and use those to try and anchor your decision. If you ask too many people or you go to too many different sites and you allow yourself to utter those two words of what if, you will just go round and around and around, and that's where the whole can get overwhelming. It can feel impossible to move forward, and I'm seeing the real anxiety and stress and some you know, some big mental health issues, as Dan was talking about, I really see coming. So I would say then do some planning based on those facts and kind of say, if these facts turn out to be true, what is it I'm going to do in September? What am I going to plan to do for Christmas? You know, what am I going to plan to do for a holiday if these facts are true? And then I would allow yourself one, maybe two scenarios that you plan for. So if you've got a worst case fear that might happen about that, like in September, the schools don't go back because there's a local lockdown, right? So that might be your worst fear. So what do you need to make that okay? Do you need to have a conversation with your employer now that says, if there's a local lockdown, what's going to be the situation, you know, so that you have an answer for that? You know, if it's a holiday, understand what is the risk you are taking. Is your insurance going to cover you? So do you really want that holiday? So you're going to pay for it and accept that if the worst happens, you lose that money, but you're safe. Or are you going to know that it's an insurance? So you try and get yourself as many facts as you can to remove this what if cycling. And that's what I'm really seeing really, really helps people. But don't fall into the trap of 100 different scenarios or asking everybody their opinion, because you won't get it. So I would always say, do it if it works and do your worst case fear. And then you know what the biggest downside is, and you can decide if that's in your risk appetite or not. So I would really recommend that. And then the third area that I'm working with people really carefully on, heavily on at the moment, is about staying on top of your own self-care. Now more than ever, we've got to keep our own batteries charged so that we are resilient enough that we can deal with whatever life is going to be like going forward, and to deal with, you know, the heightened emotions that are going to be around when you hear the town next to you's gone into lockdown, and, you know, you're trying to manage that. So be aware what drains your battery, be aware what charges your battery, and try and proactively get as much battery charging time in for yourself. And that is different for every single person, right? It's you know, different activities charge and drain us. So if it's grabbing that quiet 10 minutes, you know, when the kids are tied up in a corner or something, then grab it. If it's time with your friends, if it's a chat with somebody, if it's sitting in the garden and just having 10 minutes, do something, you know, that fits with your life, that you can achieve, and keep your self-care up. So I guess it's really about working out what's important to you, getting as many facts as you can, and making sure that if you can prepare for the worst, prepare and then park it because you know you've got a plan B. And be really kind to yourself and keep your self-care up. And just remember that everybody is in a different boat in this storm, and that's going to be true going forward. So try not to judge others, and in return, don't pay attention to any judgment you receive, because all that matters is what you think. So that's my kind of tips for the future.
That's actually helpful. Yeah, I love the fact that there's 3 nice segments of it, and that we can literally decide, you know, for big decisions. I'm going to make my own decision framework around it, and then I've got some steps around what I do from knowing the facts to actually preparing to then actually making myself comfortable about the potential outcome. So I would love to talk a bit more about any practical examples you might have had, but I'm conscious that we don't have a huge amount of time, and we'll be finishing in about 10 minutes or thereabouts, a little bit, roughly 10 to 12 minutes or so. So we may come back to this in Q&A, but let me go to Onyinye. That was amazing, Mandy, and I'm really grateful for how actionable your thoughts were. So
thank you.
We can talk about it again. So Onyinye, over to you. You're talking about getting into the new learning. So do you have any advice for people adjusting to new work schedules and routines as the new normal begins? So are there any proven techniques you've come across for people adopting change as individuals and as employers and as employees? Take it away.
Hi everyone. So I'm talking about new learning in this situation that we are in. I guess I speak about it from a very unique position as an employee, as an employer, and as a student. So I'm finishing my postgrad. I run a business, but then which I have to manage a team of over 10. And then at the same time, I'm the employee for a trust. So I'm a deputy CEO. So I think what I'm going to do is talk about each role, not necessarily each role, but how I've adapted, you know, as a student, as an employer, as an employee, and what the new learning really means. The first thing I would say before I say all of these things, because I think everyone will probably be listening thinking, how do you do all of this in 24 hours, is discipline. So Chi alluded earlier to like working out whether you're a morning person or an evening person. I think Mandy, maybe you spoke about this on a previous webinar. It's really important to know what type of person you are, and work. This new way of learning and this new way of living is actually about you. So I was saying to my CEO that, you know, I get up at about 6:30, 6 o'clock, sometimes 5:30, because I'm a morning person, and I've learned that, and I know that, and I'm most productive, you know, if I'm up from 6 for the next 6 to 8 hours, I can do a lot of work, slide in some exercise then as well to break things up a bit. But once I hit about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, actually it's my wind down time. So when we weren't in lockdown, I used to hate that period, because I used to think, I need to go to sleep now, but everybody else wants to work. So this new way of living has adapted so that I can focus a bit on me and do things that work for me without failing to meet the commitments that I've got set out. So that's the first thing. Everything in terms of all of the roles that I'm going to talk about, discipline is at the heart of it. And I guess it's so lovely to hear from Dan about mental health, because it's so easy for me to talk about discipline, where right now I can say that my mental health is in a good place. I had COVID. I was sick for 5 weeks. So just as we went into lockdown, I was very, very ill. I had awful mental health. I call it WhatsApp anxiety. I had about 600 WhatsApp messages. I had friends getting upset with me because I wasn't responding to them, because at that point I thought, I have so many messages, I don't know where to begin. I had about 500 emails, no exaggeration. I still had assignments to finish, and I just thought the world was crashing and burning. So before you have discipline, my advice is try and sort out your mental health, get support, and make sure that you've got that network around you. Okay, so what to do if you're a student? Because there are loads of students of different ages, and if you're a parent, what you can do to support your child, because I know that there'll be a couple of you listening to this as well. So one of the things I do is I run an education platform called Enrich Learning. So I have been working with over 40 to 50 students every single week across the ages 8 to 18 on an online school throughout the COVID period, even when I was sick. That was interesting. And what I would say is, as a student, what you've got to do is recognize that you're doing your very best. And I had to actually tell myself this at one stage. So I fell into the unlucky position where my lecturers went on strike, and then we had COVID. So for effectively half of the academic year, I do feel like I've been teaching myself using PowerPoint slides, recordings, and the occasional Zoom call. That means that whilst I've been in a fortunate position to still do very well academically, if you haven't, you mustn't beat yourself up about it. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, use the resource that you have and use it to the best of your ability. Reach out and ask for more. So parents, the best way for you to actually support your kid that's a student, or even if you are a student, is actually not to internalize everything and try and do the homeschooling by yourself, but reach out to the resources that you have. There are plenty of free ones, from BBC Bite Size to YouTube, to paid ones, to something with what I'm doing, where, you know, we basically take the homeschooling off the parents' back and do it for them. And there are loads of price ranges there, so do your research. As an employer, it's being conscious of learning my employees' new working style. So I can't see you. We're all virtual, we're digital. I'm dyslexic as well, so that's a whole other thing. And so it's learning, how does tech work for some people and how does it not work for others? And I'm dealing with a wide range of ages. And it's also recognizing what I call the digital divide. So we should stop assuming that everybody has laptops and iPads and phones, and be more considerate when we're asking people to do things. And that's something I've taken into consideration for my employees. So Dan mentioned he lives in Bournemouth and has like no Wi-Fi and has to use hotspot. I am so sorry. I live in London, so I've never experienced that. I don't know what that feels like. And as a millennial, I'm like, what? No Wi-Fi hotspot? Like, this is unheard of for me. But that's something that, let's say you know we were working together, I would have to take that into consideration and maybe say to myself, okay, there's no point in having a series of Zoom calls. I could just call him on the telephone, because Zoom would be more stressful. And then another thing I would say is, this new way of learning means that we have to respect people's time boundaries. Beforehand, we had 9 to 5, and it was accepted that everybody is available 9 to 5. That is no longer the case. People are at home in different situations, and now they're learning under different circumstances. So newsflash, you may have to move your meeting to 8:30 a.m. or you may have to finish before 5, because, you know, if you're a mum with kids or a dad with kids, you need to pay more attention to your children towards that time of the day. And it's things, I think those are the types of things that I'd say I've learned as an employer, and I would say other employers really need to learn. We cannot take our old way of living and fit it into this new. It doesn't work like that. And then I guess as an employee, so touching on what Kate said as well, is constant communication. I've got a brilliant CEO, Charlie. If you ever see this, you're fantastic. Checks in every day via text, isn't invasive in terms of constantly wanting meetings and calls, etc. And also really tries to still be very fun. And I know it's quite difficult. We've gone through a time where a lot of people have died. Let's not forget that some people may be grieving a loss. People will be struggling mentally. There's so much going on. But I do believe, and maybe it's the 21-year-old in me, because I am still quite young, that in everything we should still try and have a bit of fun and be a bit lighthearted. And I think if there's one thing I've learned from working with the Challenger Trust so far, is that that's so important. And it actually makes me excited to get up in the morning and do the work, because I know that I'm not going into a dreary kind of dead atmosphere. So my advice in terms of, you know, the new way of learning is make the new way of learning fun. You know, that's and it puts a smile on people's face. That's what's really important. So yeah.
That's fantastic. And you've kept us well in time. That's amazing. I mean, one thing that I've noted from what you said is like literally, and it's obvious, don't take it for granted that people have the same tech as you. So take into consideration, I had massive, you know, stars next to that point, because it's very easy to kind of go, okay, we're about to do this. So this is the Zoom link, goodbye. And if no one turns up, you blame them for not following the Zoom link rather than, you know, checking whether they're in the place to actually Zoom into a call with you. So that was fascinating. We've literally got, I would say, two or 3 minutes left. And so I'm going to try very, very, very briefly to summarize what my key takeaways from everyone. And then I mentioned before we started this, we don't have dates in August, but we'll be back in September. So the date to bear in mind for September is the 23rd of September, same time. And well before that, we'll have the content from this out in the world. So whether it's via podcasts or just video, you know, Charlie may yet have listened to all of this by then. So in terms of questions, we did have some poll results. And I'll just touch on the highest scoring option in the most popular poll. So the poll that had the most interaction. We were asking people, what are you looking forward to most post-lockdown? The options were new haircut, new nails, new work, and a break. And surprisingly, the answer with the most votes was a break, which, when we chatted about this earlier, makes a lot of sense. Everyone wants a rest. So in terms of key takeaways, it's been, I've loved this. I'm going to skip through my notes as quickly as possible and kind of share what I've taken away. From Dan's talk, you know, we're looking at a time of prolonged PTSD within the general populace. And I don't think you can say that and not realize that how scary what we're going into it actually is. You know, it's almost like a post-war type living condition. And so people have to bear that in mind when they onboard staff. Like Kate said, you know, having this work plan that actually lets you get people's feedback around how they feel daily, weekly, monthly, bearing in mind, look, stuff is going on, you know. And at the same time, we've all got this heightened awareness of inclusion and diversity in the workplace, and trying to make sure that the divides that already exist don't get widened, you know, making it possible for people to feel like, I work in this company, I know the Zoom meetings happen at such a time, for this sort of people, I may be involved in some way, but I'm scared to ask, you know, making people feel like they can be included in conversations around leadership and management, particularly when they're not from the normal sort of cast of characters that are in those conversations. We need to work hard on that. Mandy's suggestion, look at your worst case fear first, and contrast that with, you know, what you want to happen. Don't ask everyone, but, you know, do some research around preparing for that, and then having your plan B and being kind to yourself as part of that process is great. And Onyinye, you taught amazingly around kind of the different roles we have that mean that we're kind of either jumping from being a student to being an employer, and the way teams work in this time. I love what you said there about how Charlie's constant check-ins kind of make it fun to go into work. Anyone can take that away and apply that to sort of whatever team they're working with, it's remote or virtual, and I'm going to certainly look into that. So that was our roundup. We've gone through the poll results. If people have any suggestions or want to send in any recommendations about the future topics, the question board is still live, and we'll carry on chatting about this on social media. So keep an eye out for our tweets on our Senti app. And that's pretty much it. I know that people have to go bang on time because there are other calls coming up. So thank you. It just remains to thank everybody for being involved. And I look forward to working with you guys again, hopefully, with more positive things to share. So thank you, Dan Wellis. Thank you, Mandy Sinclair. Thank you, Kate Wood. Thank you, Onyinye Udoboro. I can say your name because I'm Nigerian. kind of.
Thank you.
I'll end the call for all of us. It's been amazing. Thank you guys so much. If everyone else joined in,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Great
Bye-bye.
to speak with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.